So happy 2021, first of all. I hope you had a wonderful and restful time over the holidays. And one thing I also really hope is that you found this time productive and that you didn't just consider it as a waste of time or time away from your work, or yeah, really a distraction from the things you actually want to get done. But I really want to convince you, and hopefully you're already feeling that this was actually an investment into your productivity and an investment into your creativity. Ovid once said, "What is without periods of rest will not endure." And if we look at nature, absolutely everywhere, we see cycles of rest and recovery. We see the seasons. If we look at animals, they're very good at going into a hypervigilant state and really tense and intense, but then they're also extremely good at immediately calming down again. We humans are somehow the only species that forgot about this switching to effortless calm. And we are the only ones, so especially recently, we came to pride ourselves in our busyness. And especially entrepreneurial cultures, really, there's so much value on being busy. It's kind of worn as a badge of honor. And especially in recent days, burnout has become an issue. And we're now almost at a stage where people see burnout as a badge of honor. It's quite a worrying trend in some way. But if we look back at history, Soren Kierkegaard was one of the greatest philosophers of the 19th century. He was one of the founders of existentialism. And he said, of all the ridiculous things, the most ridiculous seems to me to be busy, to be a man who is brisk about his food and his work. And he also said that far from idleness being the root of all evil, it is rather the only true good. So if we look at history, a lot of history's most accomplished minds and thinkers were actually very deliberate in their use of time off and in their use of rest. It's only recently that we forgot about all of this. And I'll get back to Bertrand Russell later, but Bertrand Russell at the beginning of the 20th century, he was one of the most ridiculously accomplished people you can imagine. He was a mathematician, a philosopher, so many other things. He was one of the greatest supporters of leisure. And he actually said that most of civilization was built by the leisure class. If you think back at all the great philosophers, all the great scientists, the people who contributed to literature, to music, to the arts over the centuries, most of those people had a lot of leisure. And they did these great things because they celebrated their leisure. And I'll get back to Bertrand Russell and this idea of the leisure class a bit later. And sorry for everyone who's joining now. We're having some issues with the slides, so I'll just do it without slides. But again, going back in history, if we look at ancient Rome and ancient Greece, that was a time where leisure really flourished, and leisure was actually seen as one of the highest things a human could aspire to. Aristotle, one of the great Greek philosophers, he said that, as I must repeat once again, the first principle of all action is leisure. And to Aristotle, it wasn't just any kind of leisure, but the idea of noble leisure, what he called noble leisure. To him, rest and leisure were two very different things. The way he defined rest was, rest always asks the question, rest for what? The answer usually being, well, rest to do more work. But leisure to him stood at the top of his hierarchy. It was completely defined through itself. It didn't need any external justification. Leisure found its justification through itself, through its meaning. So what we now consider as knowledge work, the stuff Aristotle was doing, philosophizing, to him was largely noble leisure because it filled his life with a deep, deep sense of meaning. Just getting some message here. Yeah, sorry, by the way, if anyone wants to mention anything in the chat, please go ahead, but I'm terrible at multitasking, so I'll get back to those things later. But yeah, I want to have you think about this idea of noble leisure, those leisure activities that fill your life with meaning. You might already have some in your life, and hopefully 2021 will be a year where you cultivate this noble leisure. And now I want to try a little experiment with you. It's a bit tricky because I can't see you all, but I'd like you to follow along with me. I'll ask you to take a deep breath in and then to hold your breath until I tell you to stop. Okay, if you're ready, let's all take a deep breath in and hold it. Keep holding for a bit. Just a little bit longer. Okay, let go. I'm sure that exhale felt really, really good. Maybe you could have held it a bit longer, but it was a really relieving feeling. The problem is a lot of us today walk around our everyday lives with basically our breath held. We have forgotten to exhale in a way. We've nailed down our work ethic, but we've forgotten about what me and my co-author John Fitch call a rest ethic. We really see those as two sides of the same coin, and we need both to be productive, especially in knowledge work and in creative work. So you can think of the work ethic as the inhale, going down your task list, executing projects, turning ideas into reality. That's all work ethic. That's all inhaling. But the problem is a lot of us try to just sustain this inhale forever, and we get stuck with our breath's hold. We need to also let go. We also need to embrace the rest ethic. And that's really the exhale. And it's the part that gives you a fresh perspective, that helps you with project ideation and those elusive aha moments we're all seeking. And it also lets you incubate on big ideas. And it's not just that it prepares you for the next cycle of work. It does that, but it also is productive in its own right. If you're anything like me, you probably have many of your big ideas, your big breakthroughs during moments of downtime. For me, a lot of that happens during hikes, for example. A lot of people experience it traditionally in the shower, I guess. But often it's moments of downtime where these big breakthroughs and these big creative ideas come. And it's not a coincidence. It's really backed by science. Graham Wallace in the 1920s already. So Wallace was many things. He was an economist. He was one of the founders of the London School of Economics, but he also was really deeply interested by creativity and the theory of creativity and the creative process. And he put down a theory that is still used by creativity researchers today. We've refined it a little bit, but in its basic form, it's still the same idea today. And what he did essentially was break down the creative process into 4 different stages. And those 4 stages are preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. First, we need to prepare. We need to actually sit down and do the hard work. But then we need to give this over to incubation. You let the subconscious mind turn the ideas around. This is hopefully followed by illumination. We actually have an idea, we have a breakthrough, and then it's verification. Then we actually need to sit down again and make sure that our idea was actually good and also integrated into our work. But if you think about those 4 stages, again, preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification, only 50% of that is active, preparation and verification. The other 50%, incubation and illumination, is passive. It happens during times of rest. It happens during times of time off. But because it doesn't feel hard or it doesn't make us feel busy, a lot of us seem to kind of almost feel guilty if we engage in these things. And especially for driven people or type A personalities, and I'm sure a lot of us here in this session feel that way or consider themselves that kind of person. I think a change of vocabulary helps. So maybe the next time, instead of thinking, taking a break, say you're incubating on an idea. And I just see a question, I missed the name of the man who defined the creative process. That was Graham Wallace. Let me just type that, Graham Wallace. think it was in the 1920s that he came up with this theory. But yeah, I really think a change of vocabulary can help people a lot to feel less guilty. And we really need to get away from this guilt. So a lot of this talk I'm giving today is based on my book, Time Off, which I wrote with my friend, John Fitch. And the first big chunk, or the first big chapter, we look at the history of time off and how we came to forget about this. And a lot of this dates back to the Protestant work ethic. We've lost now this association with religion a lot of the times, but we still have this deeply ingrained guilt with not working and not being busy, which we really have to shed. And again, talking of my co-author, John, he has a great story of his granddad. He tells it much better, but his granddad was a very successful businessman, Texan, but he loved fishing. And his friends didn't understand, like, why are you wasting your time fishing? So they would always give him crap when he went out fishing. And they'd ask him, like, why are you doing that? And my co-author's granddad would answer, sometimes I'm out there fishing for fish, but a lot of the times I'm out there fishing for epiphanies. And I think this kind of change of mindset, this change of framing can really help us feel less bad about engaging in this rest. And it's such a crucial part of creativity. And again, I'll talk about this a little bit more in just a few moments, but my background is in AI research. And a lot of people right now are worried about AI taking away our jobs, but I'm not worried about that at all. We should embrace it, really. Because busyness, that's the thing that's going to be automated. If you currently pride yourselves in busyness, then you really need to rethink that. No one's going to out-busy the machines, no matter how much time you put in or no matter how much of your life you're willing to sacrifice. But what this allows us, if we allow the AI to take over the busy work, it frees us up to do the really human work, to be creative, to focus on empathy, to focus on these really human connections. They are not going to be replaced by AI anytime soon. So I think the people who embrace these sides, they will thrive in the future of work. And all of these things, creativity and empathy, they require taking rest seriously. I'm sure we all know a terrible boss who's very quick to snap and very easy to anger and just doesn't get the group well. Often those people are exactly the same who also pride themselves in how little sleep they need and how busy they are. So I hope if you're a leader or if you just want to do it for yourself, that you really embrace this idea of a rest ethic, because busyness is contagious, but so is calm. So if you're a calm person, if you have a great rest ethic, it spreads to your coworkers, it spreads to your team, it spreads to your family, it spreads to all of those around you. So give the gift of calm. And I know contagious is a bit of a weird word in, well, just having finished 2020, but I hope you can be spreading the calmness around you. And to build a rest ethic, there's many, many different practices. And also one thing that we really believe in is that there's not one size fits all approach. Also this idea of noble leisure I talked about earlier. Your noble leisure might look completely different from my noble leisure. For example, when I was working on this book, which we published in May, that was it was a lot of work, but to me, it was absolutely noble leisure. It filled me with so much meaning. And it was almost the more energy I put into it, the more energized I felt afterwards. But to other people, this would definitely look like work. But really, to me, it just really fulfilled me. It was almost so that, like, at the end, once we published it in May, afterwards, I kind of had this void and was like, oh, well, what do I do with my time now? So I had to find some new noble leisure activity for me to fill this void. And I'm sure a lot of you probably like cooking. Some of you might hate it, but others get a lot of fulfillment from cooking for their family or cooking for their friends. Others might find it in gardening. These are all quite active activities. So there's nothing wrong with just watching Netflix or, I don't know, swiping on Instagram for half an hour. But it's more of a rest activity. It's more of distraction. Noble leisure are usually quite active things that give you this big sense of meaning. And in our book, we have many, many different practices that can help you. So the book is split up into deep dive chapters, which look at different aspects of time off and the science behind that. For example, there's a chapter on sleep, a chapter on exercise, solitude, play, all these different things. But within those chapters, we have profiles of almost 50 different people who were very successful through their use of time off. And with each profile, we also have one concrete practice that you can put into practice in your own life. And we really want you to try all the different things and just use what works for you, adapt it for your own use. Some of them you might find absolutely not applicable, but some you do. And those you can really make your own. And one I want to highlight right now, because I think it's very timely and also it's a very good exercise to get started with. And this comes from the profile of Seth Godin, who's ridiculously accomplished, but also a big believer in time off. And this idea is making a more of, less of list. It's a very simple exercise. You just take a sheet of paper, you make a line down the middle, and on one side, you write what you want more of in your life. And on the other side, you write what you want less of in your life. And it seems like a simple exercise, but if you actually sit down for a while and really think this through, you might be very surprised by what you come up with, and you can really use it as a guiding light for, well, 2021 and your goal setting and your planning. Another related exercise, which I really like, it's again a simple prompt, but if you sit down to really think about it, you might uncover some very interesting things. And that is all my hard work actually working? In some cases, the answer might be yes, and that's great. Then don't change anything if it's working, if you're happy with that. But often if you actually dig deep, and again, the first things that come to mind might not be very deep, but if you really push for a while, you might uncover some very interesting things. So is all your hard work actually working? And as I said, Bertrand Russell, one of the most ridiculously accomplished people in history, probably, was also a huge proponent of leisure. And he said in 1932, leisure is essential to civilization. Again, I think if everyone just thinks back at like who were the big contributors to civilization, it becomes kind of obvious. It was just the leisure class because the working class was way too busy and tired to just do the work. But that's why I think the second part of this Russell quote is very interesting. And that's, in former times, leisure for the few was rendered possible only by the labors of the many. But their labors were valuable not because work is good, but because leisure is good. And with modern technique, it would be possible to distribute leisure justly without injury to civilization. Russell was maybe a little bit early in 1932 when he said that. But today we're really at a stage where everyone, or a large majority of the population, could join the leisure class and could contribute to civilization through the arts, through culture. We really need to revalue things that are currently considered extracurricular activities, or also soft skills are very devalued, but they will be the hard currency in the future of work. So I really want you to reassess in your life a little bit, where are you just doing busy work and where are you actually investing in this creative work? And then also think, is this creative work fueled by time off and rest? And are you giving it enough of this rest and enough time off? And with that, I really wish you a 2021 with lots of rest, a lot of idea incubation, lots of noble leisure. I'll share a link to the book here. So that's a link to our book website, but you can also find it on Amazon. That's maybe a better link. And we published a book in May this year, and we've really been blown away by the amazing feedback. It became a bestseller on Amazon in multiple categories and multiple countries. We also got really great feedback from amazing people like Kevin Kelly. He was one of the co-founders of Wired magazine, and he really loved the book. He posted about it in his, thanks for sharing the link there. He was sharing the link in his recommendations in his email newsletter, and we were just so happy to see that. We got a lot of really other, like, amazing other feedback. Yes, we do have a podcast. My co-author John is doing that. I've got some really cool guests coming up now, actually. It was on hibernation for a while we were working on the book, but he's now refiring that up with some amazing guests. We're also working on a self-paced course. We have a landing page already for that, and it's going to go live in just a few days, actually. Let me just quickly share that link. Sorry that they're not working as links, but you can just copy it. You can also find me online if you want. Sorry, I'm just pasting all these links. And I also really would love to hear from you. You can send me an email at max@timeoffbook.com. I would love to hear from you about your own stories of noble leisure and also what your own rest ethic looks like. And I'd also be happy to help you with your rest ethic. For John and me, we really want to make a change in the culture. Actually, also while I'm here, I can show you the book. So it's not only full of a lot of great, hopefully, text that's going to help you build your rest ethic, but thanks to our illustrator, Maria Suzuki, it's also full of wonderful illustrations. So unfortunately, the slides didn't work, so you couldn't see them, but each of those profiles has a big illustration like this in here. We have many of what we call time off pages, which actually encourage you to put the book down for a while. And in this case, look out the window, journal, or call someone you love. Awesome, thanks for, I see someone already picked up the book. So yeah, if anything, buy it for the wonderful illustrations by Maria. She's such a wonderful artist and such a wonderful person in general. Her Instagram, I also highly recommend it. Just look her up, Maria Suzuki. She's really great. Yes, let me actually just look it up on Instagram. There we go. Just 1 second. That's Maria's Instagram account. Follow her. She's absolutely wonderful. If you want to check out mine, although I'd recommend Maria's over mine, you can find that here as well. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what your current rest ethic looks like. Especially, I think in 2020, we all really realized that rest is not just something that happens in this empty space in our calendar. It's really something that we need to take as seriously as our work ethic, and it needs some thought. So one of the weird things, or one of the kind of tricky things with time off, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem. You need to take time off first before you realize how much you actually need to take time off. And thanks, Deb. That's a really wonderful comment. I really appreciate that. And yes, Sherilyn, that's the course. Maybe a little bit of backstory, because I just said you need to take time off before you actually realize that you really need time off. So that was kind of how I personally came to see that. I did a PhD in quantum physics, so something completely unrelated, but I was extremely lucky with the people I was working with. They gave me all the freedom I wanted. I could literally disappear from the country for a while. So I did that at Imperial College in London, but I disappeared to Japan for an entire year. My professors knew, but the administration never had any idea that I wasn't in London anymore for an entire year. So yeah, I was extremely lucky at the time. I had so much freedom, and I did a lot of stuff, but I never felt busy. I co-founded a startup at the time. I ran ultra marathons at the time, but never did I feel busy. But afterwards, I left academia and I joined a startup and became an AI researcher there. And I felt initially great, but I realized I was slowly getting dragged into this busyness. And especially it hit me on a slow trip. I was taking 10 days off and I was traveling on local trains through the mountains of Japan. And one day I was sitting there in the mountains overlooking this beautiful scenery with just my notebook. And that's when I realized never in my life had I felt so busy, at the same time less accomplished and less productive and less creative. And that's really when it hit me, hey, something's wrong. And that's when I tried to uncover why or what was different. And that's really when I realized that time off is actually so valuable. For the podcast is also called Time Off. So I think on our book website, you can find a link to the existing episodes. So actually the funny thing there is my co-author, John, he read some of my articles that I wrote after this realization how valuable time off is, and I started to write about it. And he already was doing this podcast, Time Off, at the time, and he invited me on the podcast, and we became friends from there on. And one day I found an email in my inbox saying, hey, do you want to write a book together? And that was about 2 years ago. Now we're business partners. We have a best-selling book published together. The funny thing is, I'm based in Tokyo. He's based in Austin, Texas. To this day, we have never met in person. The entire collaboration was done online. We spent hundreds of hours in Zoom calls, working together in Google Documents. But to this day, we've not met in person. So the book was published on May 25. We wanted to do a big launch party together in Austin, but obviously that didn't happen in 2020. But yeah, I think it's just a sign of what's possible through online collaboration, through amazing events like this, because it was literally a Medium post that I put out that John found, commented on it, invited me on the podcast, and that's really how everything started. Thanks a lot for that link, George. Yeah. That's kind of the funny thing, Sherilyn. I do seem like a super busy guy, but I'm actually not very busy. I also hate the word busy because busy kind of means you don't have the priorities. I know it's easier said than done sometimes. And I do get busy, especially the last 2 months were a bit crazy, and I needed the holidays to also work on my rest ethic. My rest ethic, even though I've wrote a book about it, is still a constant work in progress. But again, I think if you look at a lot of the most accomplished guys, they actually take rest very, very seriously and take time off very seriously. And that's why they're so accomplished and why they can do so many different things. I think people who are just busy often have a lack of priorities. And I know I get most work done when I'm actually decidedly not busy. Also, I'd like to ask all of you to kind of reflect on that. On the days you felt the most busy, are those the days where in the evening you sit down and you actually think, okay, today I feel really accomplished and I actually made a big change? If you're anything like me, it's absolutely not the case. For me, often the days where in the evening I feel like I really accomplished something important, I really made a big breakthrough with my project, they were often the days where I didn't work more than 3 or 4 hours. But those 3 or 4 hours were just really, really productive. So I think a lot of us operate kind of at 50% all the time. We have lost this ability to switch between real relaxation and really, really being active. I think, again, that's the idea of the work ethic and the rest ethic. You really need both sides for each of them to work well. Just resting is also not good. And I'm sure that's not the goal of most people because, again, they get fulfillment through work. And this noble leisure can actually fall in some way in both sides, the work ethic and the rest ethic. But you really need this balance and this cycling through things, because 2 hours at 50% of your mental capacity is absolutely not the same as, sorry, now I lost my thread. Basically, what I'm trying to say is effort is not necessarily cumulative. If you spend 2 hours at 50%, that's not the same as 1 hour at 100%. Absolutely not. You only get those big breakthroughs if you can really get immersed in that. And that's, again, something about noble leisure. Those activities that really fill you with meaning, often those are also the activities that get you into a flow state. And I'm sure we've all experienced that. If you find yourself in that kind of state, in that kind of feeling, you can make amazing breakthroughs that would take you otherwise weeks, if you'd get those ideas at all, if you'd make that progress at all, in a very, very compressed time. So I'd really recommend focusing on, well, quality rather than quantity. And time put in does absolutely not equal the result you get out. And a lot of what we talk about, or a lot of what we recommend to start with when it comes to building your rest ethic, is really reflecting. It's really becoming aware of what's actually making a difference in your life and what's actually really helping you move forward, and doubling down on that, and then being quite ruthless with cutting out the other things, because it's so much easier to just be busy all the time, stopping and thinking if all this busyness is actually getting you anywhere, it's quite difficult. And that's why we also call it a rest ethic. It's not just something that happens, but it's so valuable to make this change. But it needs to be a conscious change. And hopefully 2021, again, it's the start of a new year. So it's probably the perfect time to think about these things, reflect on these things, and then see how you can integrate them in your own life. Do we have any other question? I think I'm over time. So far, it seems like no one's kicking us out. So I could rant on for a while, but I also want to be respectful of everyone else's time. Yeah, if I have one big ask, oh, thanks, Linda. That's wonderful. That's exactly what I was trying to say. I would love for you to pick up the book, and I also would really love to hear from you. One, kind of what does your rest ethic look like and your noble leisure? And also what you thought if you had a chance to read the book. Noble leisure activities, again, it's very, very personal. So you really need to think what in your life, what kind of free time or rest activity or leisure activity is probably the better word, fills your life with meaning. So where do you get into this kind of flow state? Where do you feel like you're actually accomplishing something, or where do you really get completely lost in it? And it's a sense of meaning, which I think a lot of us are maybe lacking a little bit. And that's also why we keep being busy, because the busyness is kind of plastering over this lack of meaning, this void that's there because of a not very well established leisure life. But use meaning sort of as a guiding principle in your life. I posted an article on Medium about exactly this recently. Maybe I can put it in the chat later if I can find it. Yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with binge watching random movies and TV series. Again, there's a value for pure rest as well, like really rest, just kind of switching off. Maybe this watching random movies and TV series is actually noble leisure to you. Maybe that really fills you with meaning. But I think for a lot of people, maybe just doing that, it's not giving us enough of this sense of fulfillment and meaning. Oh yeah, there's a wonderful tech-free fasting. So there's actually one exercise we have in the book. It's, let me see if I can find this one. Basically, it's a tech Shabbat. And the idea is really taking the Shabbat or Sabbath and to completely switch off all your devices for a day. Ideally, you even do it with your family and have a little bit of a ceremony around it where you really put all your devices away. You might even have to prepare for it. Again, it's something that needs conscious effort and needs preparation. You might have to print out maps for the next day where, like, if you're traveling, or you might have to write down some phone numbers. But if you actually do it, it's such a wonderful activity. And another one I really like, especially right now, because travel hasn't really been a thing over the last couple of months or the last year almost. But if you can take this mindset of the traveler and this traveler's eye into your own neighborhood, you can discover so many amazing things just down the road. I talk with so many different people who, for the first time, took long walks in their neighborhood almost daily. And they walked down random alleys, which are just 5 minutes away from their house. But they said they've never seen this place before because they're always too busy or didn't venture down into a side alley, which is not directly on their way. But in that way, they managed to bring travel to their own backyard. And if you can cultivate this kind of traveler's eye, I think that's also really valuable. One of the chapters in the book is also on play. And I think travel, if you approach it in that way, is also very playful. And children are extremely good at creativity as well. They just lack. So actually, if we look at the creative process again, this preparation, incubation, illumination, verification, it's almost like children are very good at two of those phases. They just still lack the capabilities to verify, but they're so incredible at the creative aspects. There's one example in the book, I'm blanking on the name of the scientist whose theory this is, but she's a child psychologist, one of the most accomplished child psychologists and who studies children's learning as well. And she talks about this idea of a lantern versus a spotlight mindset. Most adults, as busy people, we have a spotlight mindset. We're very focused. We can very narrow down on a particular problem. And we're illuminating this ideal landscape like a spotlight. That's great. There's value for that. But kids, they operate at a lantern consciousness or lantern mindset. They illuminate this ideal landscape like a light lantern. It's very diffuse, very widespread. If we want to be good and productive creative workers, the best thing we can do is being able to switch between those. And again, it's kind of work ethic, rest ethic in a way. If we can switch between this lantern mindset, we really let our subconscious mind wander freely and discover different ideas, because creativity is really connecting distant dots. If you're always too deep in the problem, you're always just going to be connecting nearest neighbor dots. So you really need to zoom out and let your subconscious mind run on a long leash, essentially. And that's kind of flipping between these ideas of lantern mindset or lantern consciousness and spotlight consciousness. There's also a great author I talked to recently, Natalie Nixon. She published a book on creativity also this year. And she defines creativity as the interplay of wonder and rigor. And again, we have those two aspects, the work ethic and the rest ethic. The rigor is really sitting down and actually doing the hard work. That is an important part of the creative process. But you also need wonder, and that's noble leisure, that's rest, that's time off, it's play. If you can integrate those two and find the right balance, and it's really all about balance and finding the right cycles for you, that's where you can really find creativity. And talking about cycles, actually, those cycles also look different from time to time. And also for me, sometimes my rest and my work switch many times within a day. Other times I might want long stretches of only time off. I might want long sabbaticals. Just like what is noble leisure to you is looking very different from what's noble leisure to someone else. And also over your seasons in life, this might change. So does the sort of like how you time box your rest and how you time box your noble leisure change over time. And it's really something that's constantly evolving. As I said, my rest ethic now looks very different than it did a year before, and it's still far from perfect. Especially with everything that's been going on over the last year, we all had to make quite a few adjustments, and I'm constantly working on my rest ethic, and I don't think I'll ever stop working on that. And there's always some setbacks. We often also get asked by parents what we can recommend to them their rest ethic should look like. And to be honest, I don't have kids yet, so I feel very, very unqualified commenting on that. John, my co-author, he also doesn't have kids, but he just got 2 puppies, which is nowhere near the same, but it's definitely some kind of taste of what kids are. And again, to these people, a rest ethic looks completely different than it looks to someone like me. So you really have to think for yourself what works for you and what makes sense as rest ethic practices and noble leisure activities. But I hope you'll use this weekend and the beginning of 2021 to reflect on that and start strong with a good rest ethic, and hopefully have a year filled with noble leisure. Thank you. Really appreciate that. And again, if you have anything you want to chat about, please reach out. We're also, if that applies to some of you here, we've been talking to a lot of companies. We want to help companies build their rest ethic. We've had some great interest from really big names like Deloitte and Twitter already, actually, who essentially want help, because a lot of leaders are realizing, especially in the US, they can give their workers as much free time as they want, but a lot of the workers are actually struggling to take it. They're worried that they burden their team if they take time off. They're worried that it doesn't look like they're actually, getting stuff done if they're taking time off. They're worried that the more busy people are seen as more hardworking or more accomplished by their peers or their bosses. So a lot of leaders are currently actually really trying, how can they help their people build better rest ethics and really make use of the time off that they're given by their employers. So if you're running a company and would like to work with us on that, we'd be super happy to help, or just start a discussion, really. I mean, we're not going to change the culture by ourselves. We really want to work with a lot of people who really deeply care about this. So if that's something interesting to you, send an email, get in touch in some other way. We'd love to hear from you. Yeah, also thanks for all the participation in chat. That was really wonderful. And I'm here in Germany, so it's already past 10 p.m. And I'm actually flying back to Japan tomorrow. So I still need to do a little bit of packing and then get some wonderful sleep, which is one of the most universal forms of time off. So have a wonderful evening, rest of the day, and a wonderful 2021, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.